guys, it's Velia here, and I'm finally back from Scotland. I had such an amazing time there with my friend Danielle, but it's finally time to get back into the grind, and I thought that I'd kick off my content with a much requested video, and that is raid leading tips. So sit back, enjoy, and let's jump right into it. So starting out, I want to preface that I'm going to be making this video as a general guide to raid leading, something that can be used across pugs, guild groups, and whatever else. I don't want to make a video designed really to focus on one or the other more, as the game has really evolved to a place where either is pretty acceptable. Keep in mind that this guide is for people who are looking to lead a serious heroic or mythic group. Most people can form up a group for normal and even the first few bosses on heroic and scrape by without really understanding these key facts. So this guide is for someone who is looking to create a long-lasting or successful group on more difficult content. Tip number 1 is familiarize yourself with the encounter. So this might seem like a given, however I can't count the amount of times that I've joined a group, a pug or a guild group, and the raid leader is totally unaware of all of the boss mechanics. This is a very important thing as a raid leader, especially if you want to create longevity and trust within your group. If the raiders think that you don't know the encounters, they're not going to want to stay with you in the group, as the fights only get tougher as you proceed within the encounter. There are a few ways to research a fight. My first recommendation would just be to read the in-game dungeon or raid journal. If you find that you're not understanding or you're having a hard time with some abilities, my next suggestion would be to open up Wowhead and just find the raid overview sections and then read the entire article. Finally, you can also find plenty of great video guides such as Fat Boss or Signs of Kalani that will give you an understanding of the encounters as well. Tip number 2 is understanding the class rules. This tip almost goes hand in hand with the next tip, but it's different enough that I feel like I need to point it out. As a raid leader, you have to have at least a basic understanding of most classes to understand if the people in your raid group are pulling their weight. And now I'm not saying you need to understand the ins and outs of all classes in your composition, but it is important to know what each class is capable of and the basics of each spec. For example, say your paladin tank is struggling on fights. Is this a healer problem, a tank problem, or a gear problem? To find out, you'll have to have an understanding of logs, tip number 3, and an understanding of all the classes involved, the tanks, the healers, etc., and an understanding of the encounter. The first thing to check in this particular example is if the tank's active mitigation is up. This is why understanding classes on a basic level is very important as a raid leader. For example, if you don't see Shield of the Righteous, which is the paladin tank's active mitigation, then you know that it's most likely a tanking issue. The next thing maybe to look out for would be healing spells on the tank. Are the paladins keeping up beacon? Does the tank have life bloom if there's a druid? Does the shaman keep it up riptide, etc.? You can see why having a basic understanding of all the classes is very important to lead in a raid, especially when you come across some basic problems during the encounter. As mentioned, tip number 3 is being able to read logs. This is very important. You cannot be a successful raid leader if you do not understand how to look at logs critically. As in the example I used above, it is important to be able to look at logs to determine what is happening when problems arise in the raid. It is also important to be able to look at logs so you can help your raiders improve. Is a DPS or a healer falling under the rest of the group? Is a tank struggling to stay alive? It should be up to you as the raid leader to be able to look at logs and figure out what they're doing wrong. Logs are also a great way to find out the reasons to wipes. Unfortunately, many raiders do not own up to their mistakes when they mess up during an encounter. To find out why a raider died, if he doesn't automatically own up to it, you'll need to turn to logs to help you understand why he or she has failed. Logs are a very successful tool, and if you need any help understanding how to read them, there are plenty of articles and video guides out there in the nether sphere, so look them up. Or you can also put in the comments below that you'd like to see me make a video about this. Just let me know. Tip number 4 is understand the difficulty of your raid and then fill appropriately. Encounters have difficulties. That's just basically the general basics of raiding. And it's up to you to fill the raid so that you're able to finish it on the difficulty that you decide. The question is, how do you best decide what item level or skill level is best for the raid? The first step is taking a look at the item level gear that the difficulty you want to complete drops. For example, if you're forming a heroic Tomb of Sargeras run, the base item level on gear is 915 on all bosses except for Kill Jaden, who drops 925 base level gear. This means that 910 is a good starting item level to look at for when you're recruiting for your group. Next up, when is it appropriate to ask people for an achievement such as ahead of the curve? Well, it depends on the type of raid that you're running. If your group is progression-minded, meaning you or the majority of your raiders in your group have not yet killed the final boss, then it does not make sense to ask that of players who are signing up for the encounter. In this case, instead of asking for their achievement, you should ask the amount of time that they can dedicate to the group, their raiding temperament, and if they're willing to stay after a few wipes on certain encounters. If your group is a little bit more progressed, or you're looking to simply speed clear, then it is appropriate to ask for the AOTC achievement. It all depends on the type of group that you're running. However, some red flags to potential raiders would be if you're asking for the ahead of the curve achievement and you haven't yet received that achievement as well. Another red flag is to have the auto invite on, writing in all caps in your raid description, and having a huge item level requirement for anything less than mythic. Another thing to look out for when filling your group is a player's gear and talents, not just their item level. If the player hasn't enchanted all of their pieces, or if they haven't gemmed all open sockets, then that is a huge red flag that they are not ready for higher level raiding. Checking their talents will also let you know if this raider has a good understanding of their class. And this is going back to tip number 2 and your understanding of all class roles. Tip number 5 is don't raise your voice during raid. Tip number 5 might be one of the most important yet if you're looking to keep a raid group around for a long time. This tip is all about respect. As discussed, being a raid leader takes a lot of work, and sometimes that work might be stressful. However, the absolute worst thing that you can do is take out that stress on your raiders. A good raid leader understands that their raiders aren't perfect and that they're going to slip up occasionally. Even the best of players make mistakes, but it's how you handle these mistakes that defines your skill as a good raid leader. Say someone messes up. You basically have 3 options. Publicly shame them in front of the other raiders for 10 minutes in your voice chat, kick them immediately from the group, or whisper them why they fucked up and ask them to improve on the next few pulls. Which method do you think retains more loyal raiders? It's definitely not the first 2. Raiders will be more willing to own up to their mistakes if they know that you're not going to flip out on them, or if they know that you'll actually be willing to help them improve on their mistakes. Nothing makes a raider want to leave a group more than a public shaming in front of their fellow raiders. Understanding that almost everything on an individual level can be handled in whispers or in voice chat after the raid is a very important part of being a successful raid leader. And that about wraps up this video. There are definitely more tips for me to go over, but I think I will save those for another video in the future. Please tell me what you thought about the video in the comments below, and if you learned something, be sure to leave a like. Thanks so much for watching this video. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and until next time, bye!